I spent the Christmas of 2014 working nights at a small historical church tucked into the lower slopes of the Appalachian foothills, the kind of place that felt older than whatever history they wrote in the pamphlets. I'd only taken the job because the pay was steady and the hours let me avoid most people. But after the first week, I realized it wasn't the sort of place a person should be alone in after dark. The halls held their own kind of stillness. Not peaceful or comforting, but a cold, breathless silence that seemed to press in around you. Even my footsteps felt wrong, echoing in ways that made me look over my shoulder more times than I'd ever admit. The church was small enough to walk from one end to the other in under a minute, but at night it felt bigger. The old wooden floors groaned under the weight of the building settling after decades of Appalachian winters. Sometimes I'd swear I heard someone walking a few steps behind me, only for the sound to stop the moment I turned. I blamed it on the age of the structure, on the quiet of the mountains, on my own nerves. That worked for a while. It had to. My job was simple. Keep the heat running so the old ornaments on display wouldn't crack, check the doors, make sure no one broke in. The church had been built in the late 1800s, and they'd filled it with antique decorations every December. Hand-carved figurines, glass ornaments, old candle lanterns no one was allowed to light. My shift started at 10 and ended at 6, and most nights passed without anything worse than cold drafts slipping under the doors. But Christmas Eve felt different before anything even happened. The air was sharper, almost metallic, and the snow outside looked like it had been falling the same way for hours. Straight down, no wind at all. The whole valley was muted under that weather. The forest pressed in close and heavy. When I unlocked the front doors and stepped inside, every light felt dimmer than usual, like the building wasn't interested in helping me see tonight. Nothing happened for nearly 2 hours. I made my rounds, checked the boiler room, walked through the tiny museum corridor, and tried not to think about the way my breath seemed a little too loud in the empty halls. Around midnight, I settled into the office to drink coffee that had gone lukewarm too fast. I wasn't tired, but something about the quiet made me feel like I should whisper, even when no one else was there. Then I heard it. Soft at first. Faint enough that I thought the wind outside had picked up. But the sound grew slowly, not louder, just clearer. Like something tuning itself through the walls. Singing. It wasn't coming from outside. It wasn't drifting in through vents or pipes. It was inside the building, and it was close enough that I felt it in my chest before I fully understood what I was hearing. A choir. Small, maybe 5 or 6 voices, singing in soft, wavering harmony. No instruments, no melody I recognized. Just human voices blending in this trembling, breathless way that made every instinct I had tighten like a fist. I stepped out of the office, and the singing seemed to come from the sanctuary, the main room of the church where the nativity display sat under a warm glow of lights. I froze in the hallway, listening. Whoever was singing didn't sound confident. Their voices trembled, like people trying to hold a note through cold lungs. And yet the harmony was intact, steady, as if they'd practiced together for years. I should have called the sheriff right then, but something about the sound held me in place. It wasn't joyful or festive. It was lonely. Desperate, almost. Like someone begging to be heard. When I finally walked toward the sanctuary, every step felt wrong. My legs were cold, my hands colder. The singing grew clearer, but the moment I touched the sanctuary doors, it stopped. Not faded. Not shifted. It ended instantly, like someone had cut a wire. I pushed the doors open. The lights were on. The nativity display cast soft shadows across the floor. The pews were empty. The air hung still, almost heavy, like the room had been holding its breath waiting for me to enter. I walked between the rows, checking for anyone who might have ducked down or hidden. Nothing. Just the soft hum of the old lights overhead. I turned back toward the hallway, trying to decide if I'd imagined the whole thing. But the moment I stepped out of the sanctuary, the instant the doors clicked shut behind me, the choir started again. Closer. Right behind me. I spun around, yanked the doors open, and again the singing stopped. This time the silence felt hostile, like whatever was inside didn't want me seeing it, only hearing it. Something about that realization made my skin crawl. I tested it twice more, stepping into the hall, listening as the choir returned in a trembling hum. then jumping back inside only for the sound to evaporate. Each time the transition was too clean, too instantaneous to be human. No group of people could stop singing in perfect unison without a single breath or rustle of movement. I walked down the hall to the museum corridor, trying to gather myself. The glass display case along the wall reflected the dim lights perfectly. As I passed, I caught something in the corner of my eye. Shapes in the pews. Human shapes, sitting perfectly still. I froze so hard it hurt. Slowly, I turned my head toward the sanctuary doors. They were closed. There was no way to see inside. But the reflections in the glass didn't care. The shapes sat in the pews just as clear as if I had been looking through the doors themselves. Silhouettes hunched slightly forward, heads bowed as if waiting for something. I backed away from the glass, keeping my eyes on those reflections until they faded with my distance. The choir had stopped again, though I couldn't remember when. Everything felt suspended. Sound, movement, even my own breathing. I don't remember making the decision to leave the building. My body simply took over. I walked out into the falling snow, forgetting my coat inside. The cold bit into my skin, but I kept walking until the church was a dim shape behind me and the forest swallowed the sound of my own footsteps. I quit the next morning. I didn't ask for my last paycheck. I didn't go back for my coat or my thermos or anything I might have left behind. A month later, the church closed for structural repairs, though I never saw anyone working on it. It stayed empty for years. But the worst part didn't start until the next Christmas. Around the same time, just after midnight, I heard something faint as I sat alone in my apartment. A hum, barely noticeable at first. So soft I thought it was an appliance or the pipes in the wall. But it grew. Just a little. Just enough. Soft, wavering voices, singing a note that didn't belong to any song I knew. Trembling, breathless, distant, but close enough to feel in the back of my throat. I hear it every Christmas now. Always around midnight. Always behind me. I don't open any doors anymore. My grandmother's cabin sat on the edge of a steep ridge that dropped straight into a dark run of pines and laurel thickets. Even in daylight, the woods looked like they were leaning toward the house, listening. At night, the ridge gathered the wind in a way that made it sound like feet moving across loose gravel, or someone dragging a stick along the porch rail. I used to hate visiting her when I was younger because of it, but after the breakup that left me feeling hollow, I didn't have anywhere else to go. She told me I could stay the week of Christmas, just to get your head right, and I agreed mostly because she didn't ask questions the way everyone back home did. She'd gotten stranger with age, though. Not confused, not forgetful. Just connected to the woods in a way that made me uncomfortable. She kept every curtain open, even at night, and told me it was so she could feel the forest watching. She said it like it was a comfort, something familiar. I'd lie on her old pull-out couch listening to the wind scrape across the walls and wonder how anyone could sleep with the darkness pressed right up against the glass like that. The second night, I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of her whispering my name. Not urgently. Not afraid. Just quietly, like she didn't want to wake anything else in the house. I found her standing in the hallway in her nightgown, pointing toward her bedroom with a shaking hand. She said someone was standing outside her window, just far enough back that she could only see the top half of their head. I told myself she'd been dreaming. But when I went to check, the window was fogged over from the outside. Not the inside, the outside. Like someone had pressed their face or their breath against the cold glass for a long time. There weren't any footprints in the snow below, but the ground was steep near the ridge and the drifts shallow. Anything could have melted or covered itself. I told her it was probably an animal breathing against the window. She didn't argue, but she gave me a look I still think about. A look that said she knew I was lying to make her feel better. The next night, the cabin felt wrong the moment the sun went down. The wind dropped to nothing, and the woods went quiet in a way I'd never heard before. No owls, no branches creaking, not even the distant sound of the river. Just this heavy, unmoving stillness that made my skin prickle. My grandmother sat in her rocking chair beside the window, staring out into the tree lane as if she were waiting for someone. Around midnight, I heard it. Footsteps circling the cabin. Slow. Dragging. not crunching through the snow the way an animal would, but pressing into it like a person taking careful, deliberate steps. They moved around the house once, then again, tracing the perimeter like someone trying to memorize the shape of it. The boards inside the walls creaked softly with each pass, like they knew exactly where to step to make the old wood respond. When the footsteps paused outside the kitchen, I forced myself to look. I pulled back the curtain just an inch. At first I didn't see anything but the reflection of dim light on glass. Then I realized the reflection wasn't matching my movements. It wasn't a reflection at all. It was a figure standing perfectly still near the tree lane, just outside the reach of the porch light. They weren't hiding, weren't trying to blend in. They stood there facing the house, arms at their sides, heads slightly tilted like they were listening. I didn't wake my grandmother. I didn't move. I don't even think I breathed. Something about the way that figure stared made me feel like acknowledging them would invite something I wasn't ready for. By morning, there were no prints. The steps I'd heard all night left no trail, but the snow beneath the kitchen window looked disturbed. Smoothed, maybe. Brushed clean. I called the sheriff. He came out, took a slow walk around the house, then told us the same thing they always say out there. Probably an animal, probably the wind, probably nothing. But he kept glancing at my grandmother like he wanted to ask her something and didn't have the nerve. After he left, she told me not to worry, that the visitor wasn't dangerous. When I asked her how she knew that, she said he'd been coming to see her ever since my grandfather passed, that he always returned around Christmas, when the veil between old debts and old promises thins out. I didn't know what she meant, and she wouldn't explain. I didn't believe her until the final night, when everything in the cabin felt stretched too thin, like the walls were holding their breath with us. I couldn't sleep. The wind had picked up again, but it wasn't moving the trees. It wasn't even touching the porch. It all sounded distant, like the world had stepped back from the ridge. My grandmother went to bed early, leaving her curtains open as usual. I still don't know how she wasn't afraid. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to a sound I'll never forget, a faint knocking on the window right beside my bed. Not tapping, knocking, like someone politely asking to be let in. My whole body froze. I could see the outline of the window through the curtain, just a darker square of black in the dark room. The knocking came again, a little slower this time, like whoever was doing it didn't want to scare me. Just remind me they were there. I forced myself to lift the curtain just enough to see outside. There was nothing. No shape. No shadow. No person leaning close. But the cold glass was fogged over from the outside, a cloudy smear that slid downward like breath drifting away. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. I whispered for my grandmother, but she didn't answer. I waited, listening, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps moving away from the window. No crunching snow. No stumbling. Just the soft sound of weight shifting across bare, frozen ground. When I checked the outside in the morning, there were no prints. None near my window, none circling the house, none near the tree lane. But the snow in several places had a strange, faint sheen to it, like it had been smoothed by something warm that melted the top layer without leaving any impression beneath. My grandmother packed her things that afternoon and told me she was moving to a retirement home near town. She didn't say why. She didn't have to. Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself glancing toward my own windows the way she used to. Slowly, carefully, like I'm afraid of catching someone already standing there. I haven't heard the footsteps again. Not yet. But winter is coming fast, and I've learned something I wish I hadn't. Whatever visits those old cabins in the mountains doesn't always leave when the snow melts. I spent the Christmas of 2014 working nights at a small historical church tucked into the lower slopes of the Appalachian foothills, the kind of place that felt older than whatever bits of history they wrote in the pamphlets. I'd taken the job because the pay came on time and the hours kept me away from people, which was what I thought I wanted back then. But after the first week, it hit me that the building didn't sit right at night. It wasn't the usual kind of empty. It was the sort of silence that felt like it was waiting on you to make a mistake. The cold inside wasn't just a draft. It had weight. The echoes of my footsteps bounced off the walls wrong, like they were moving ahead of me instead of behind. and more than once I turned around expecting to see someone there. I never did. But that didn't stop me from checking. The church was small in the way old mountain buildings are, 30 steps from the front door to the back office. Yet when the sun went down, the halls stretched out like something was pulling them wider. The floors creaked and groaned after a century of Appalachian winters, and sometimes I'd swear the board shifted just after I passed, as if settling back into place behind me. I told myself it was just the old structure breathing in the cold, but deep down it never felt like that. My job was simple. Keep the heat at a steady level so the antique ornaments in the December exhibit wouldn't crack, walk the halls, lock the doors, and make sure nobody wandered in after hours. Most nights, the biggest problem was a draft slipping beneath the sanctuary doors or the boiler clicking louder than it should. It was lonely work, sure, but predictable. Or it should have been. Christmas Eve didn't feel right from the start. I knew it before I even stepped inside. The snow outside was falling hard but straight down. No wind, no drift, just these perfect sheets of white coming out of a dark sky. The air had that metallic bite that usually means a storm's rolling in, but the weather report had promised a clear night. The whole valley looked muted, as if the mountains were holding their breath. When I unlocked the double doors at 10, the light seemed dimmer than usual, like they were struggling to push back the dark that had followed me inside. I walked through the halls to check the heating units and felt the echo under my feet, long and stretched, like my steps were landing farther away than they should. The nativity display glowed in its usual place at the front of the sanctuary, but even those warm lights felt like they were holding something back. For the first few hours, nothing happened. I made my rounds, checked the boiler, swept my flashlight along the walls out of habit, then returned to the office to drink the coffee I had let sit too long. Even the coffee felt wrong, cooling faster than it should, like the air was swallowing the heat. Around midnight, I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Not tired, just drained. That's when I heard it. Soft at first, barely audible. A tone. Not quite a note, not yet singing, but something like a warm-up hum vibrating through the walls. I sat up, listening. It grew clearer, not louder, just more defined, as if the building was tuning itself. Then the hum broke into voices. A small choir, 5 or 6 voices at most, drifting through the halls in a trembling, wavering harmony. No instruments, no clear melody, nothing festive or familiar. Just these breathy, fragile voices clinging to each other like they were standing in the cold and trying to stay alive long enough to finish the song. I froze with my hand halfway to my radio. Something about the way the voices blended made my lungs tighten. They weren't polished. They weren't rehearsed. They were pleading. I stepped into the hallway, and the sound seemed to draw me toward the sanctuary. I moved slow, every step getting colder, as if the temperature dropped the closer I got. The singing grew clearer until it felt like they were standing just behind the wooden doors. I hesitated, hand hovering an inch from the handle. The moment I touched the door, the singing cut off. Not faded, not paused, stopped dead. I opened the doors. The sanctuary glowed under its soft lights. The nativity cast warm shadows across the floor. The pews were empty. The air felt thick, like the room had been holding something in, waiting for me to confront it. I walked between the rows slowly, feeling the air shift around me, but nothing moved. I went back to the hall and let the doors close behind me. The choir started again. Closer. Right behind me. I yanked the doors open. Silence. The kind of silence that feels like someone's hand clamping over your mouth. I stepped into the sanctuary again, and every part of me felt watched, but from where? Nothing stirred. Nothing breathed. I tested it over and over, trying to convince myself it was some old acoustic quirk. Step into the hall, the choir returns in a trembling hum. Step into the sanctuary, the sound dies instantly. No rustle of clothing, no shifting feet, no breaths being cut short. Just a perfect, unnatural stop, like they only existed when I wasn't looking. The realization crawled up my spine slowly. Whatever I was hearing didn't want to be seen. The last test I made was the one that broke me. I walked down the hall to the museum corridor, trying to calm myself. The glass display cases along the wall reflected everything behind me. I passed by one and caught sight of shapes in the reflection. Silhouettes seated in the pews, facing the front, shoulders hunched slightly as though bracing for cold. But the sanctuary doors were closed. There was no angle to see inside. The reflection didn't care. I stopped breathing for a moment, watching the shapes. They didn't move. They didn't shift. They simply sat there, waiting. I stepped back slowly. The shapes remained for a heartbeat longer, then faded as if I had broken their attention by noticing. I felt something tighten around the air of the entire hallway, as though the building itself had closed its throat. I don't fully remember deciding to leave. One moment I was staring into the reflection, and the next I was outside in the falling snow without my coat. The cold seared my skin, but I felt relieved, like I had finally stepped out of something that had been holding me in place. I walked until the church was just a faint glow behind me and the silence of the woods swallowed the last traces of the choir. I quit the next morning. I told the director I was done and didn't even bother collecting the rest of my things from the office. A month later, the church shut down for what they called structural repairs, but I never saw a single contractor on that mountain. The doors stayed locked, and the windows stayed dark. For a while, I managed to convince myself it was stress, exhaustion, a trick of old wood and cold air. It worked until the next Christmas Eve. Just after midnight, sitting alone in my apartment, I heard it again. A faint hum rising from the walls, threading through the floorboards, soft enough to ignore if I really wanted to. But then the hum broke into voices. Trembling, breathless, distant. The same choir I had heard in the church. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Their voices were close, humming just beyond my field of vision, as if standing in the next room, as if waiting behind a door I didn't dare open. I hear them every Christmas now, always around midnight, always behind me. I don't open doors anymore. I always hated the stretch of Route 19 that cuts through the lower ridges. Anyone who's driven it at night knows what I mean. The road dips and curves in a way that makes you feel like you're sinking deeper into the trees with every passing mile, and the forest presses so close that your headlights barely make a difference. There are no houses, no gas stations, no pull-offs worth trusting. Just woods, heavy and silent, as if everything inside them is holding its breath until you finally pass through. My mother told me once that the locals avoided that stretch after dark, but she never said why. She just said, "If you ever break down out there, keep moving. Don't stop for anything." At the time, I thought she meant animals or thieves. I didn't realize she meant something else entirely. It was late December of 2017, and I was driving home from college for Christmas break. The sky had been clear when I left, but halfway through the mountains the weather turned fast. Snow started falling in those heavy, wet clumps that stick to the pavement before the plows have a chance to catch up. It made everything quieter, dangerously so, like the storm had swallowed the sound of my engine. I slowed down, leaning close to the windshield because my wipers couldn't keep up, but it didn't help. The wind picked up, the visibility dropped, and before I knew it, the car slid sideways across a patch of ice and straight into a shallow ditch. I tried rocking it out, gunning the engine, turning the wheel, anything to get traction, but the tires only spun helplessly. After a minute, the engine coughed like it was giving up, and the lights dimmed. I sat there for a long moment with my hands still on the wheel, listening to the soft hiss of snow piling against the doors. I checked my phone. No service, of course. That entire part of Route 19 might as well be a dead zone carved out of the map. I knew the highway patrol usually passed through every few hours, but it was Christmas week, the storm was getting worse, and I didn't want to wait in a dead car that was quickly losing heat. So I grabbed my bag, zipped my coat up as tight as it would go, and started walking. The cold hit hard, sharper than I expected. It felt like the air bit through my clothes and settled deep in my ribs. The road stretched ahead in dim gray, the kind of darkness that didn't feel empty. More like it was watching me. I kept my head down and moved quickly, trying to follow the tire tracks that hadn't yet filled with snow. My boots crunched rhythmically, the only sound for what felt like miles. That quiet somehow made the storm worse. There were moments I couldn't tell if I was hearing real movement in the woods or just the shifting of snow on branches. I had walked maybe a mile when I saw him. A figure on the road ahead, standing perfectly still on the shoulder like he'd been planted there. No car nearby. No footprints behind him that I could see. Just a man facing the road, his shape blurry through the falling snow. I felt this immediate, instinctive unease, the kind that crawls into your stomach before your brain catches up. At first, I hoped it was another stranded driver, someone I could walk with until we reached the main highway. But as I got closer, the unease got heavier. He wasn't dressed for the storm at all. No jacket. No gloves. Not even a scarf. Just a thin shirt and jeans already dusted white with snow. His hands hung loosely at his sides, fingers pale and stiff. He didn't wave or step forward. He didn't even shiver. He just stared at me like he'd been waiting. "Hey," I called out, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "Are you okay? Did your car break down?" He didn't answer immediately. His head tilted the slightest bit, like he was trying to understand why I had spoken first. Then, in a voice too steady for the cold he was standing in, he asked, "Could you walk me back to where the lights were?" I slowed down 10 feet away from him. Something in the way he said it felt wrong. Not the words themselves. People get lost out there all the time, but the tone. It didn't match the situation. No fear. No urgency. No relief at seeing another person. Just a calmness that didn't belong in the middle of a snowstorm. "What lights?" I asked. "Where were you coming from?" He lifted one arm slowly and pointed down a narrow service road I hadn't even noticed. One of those unmarked paths maintenance trucks use sometimes. Nothing more than hard-packed dirt disappearing into a line of pines. The snow had already covered most of it, leaving only a faint suggestion of direction. That path led nowhere. I knew that instinctively. There were no houses out there, no cabins, no power lines. Just woods. "I can't go that way," I told him, tightening my grip on my bag. "I'm heading toward the highway. It's safer." He took one step closer. Not aggressive, not threatening. Just a slow, deliberate movement that made every part of me tense. "They don't like being alone on Christmas," he said. The way he said it wasn't a warning. It wasn't a plea. It was a certainty, spoken like someone repeating a rule he'd learned the hard way. The snow fell harder around us, muffling everything but his voice. For a moment, I felt like the entire forest had leaned in to hear my answer. "I should keep going," I managed, stepping backward. "The highway patrol will be through soon." He didn't move this time. He just kept watching me with this hollow patience, like he was measuring how far I could walk before he had to follow. I didn't want to turn my back on him, but instinct won over politeness. I backed away, then turned and walked fast, trying not to run. My footsteps sounded too loud, cracking through the quiet in a way that made me paranoid about what I couldn't hear behind me. I told myself not to look. That looking would make it worse. But after a minute, when the hairs on the back of my neck rose for no reason I could name, I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was closer. Not running. Not even walking fast. Just nearer. Like the distance between us had folded somehow. He still didn't shiver, and his shirt didn't seem any heavier with snow than before. He didn't call after me. Didn't quicken his pace. He simply followed, each of his steps perfectly spaced, perfectly aligned, like someone walking through rehearsed marks on a stage. I forced myself to keep facing forward. Every few seconds I heard footsteps in the snow that weren't mine. Soft, steady, inescapable. My legs felt numb, not from the cold but from fear sinking deep enough to root itself. The storm swallowed the road around me, the trees becoming dark shapes that leaned closer the farther I walked. The footsteps behind me kept time with mine, never speeding up, never slowing down. Just always there. When the lights of a highway patrol truck finally broke through the curtain of snow ahead, it felt unreal, like something I'd imagined out of desperation. I heard the tires crunch over the snow before I saw the vehicle fully. The red and blue reflection flickered weakly off the falling flakes, and I stepped into the road waving both hands. The truck slowed fast, the driver calling out if I was hurt. I couldn't answer right away. I just kept pointing behind me, breath fogging in uneven bursts. But when the driver got out and shined his flashlight up the road, the beam cut through nothing but snow and darkness. No footprints. No tracks. Not even mine, though I had just walked nearly 2 miles through untouched snow. The wind had covered everything. Must have been the storm, he said, though his voice didn't sound convinced. Let's get you warmed up. I climbed into the truck, shaking so hard I could barely close the door. I asked him twice if he'd seen anyone at all on the road behind me. Both times he said no. That no one would have been out there without a coat in that weather. That no one could have survived more than a few minutes like that. I didn't tell him that the man hadn't looked cold. That his voice sounded too steady, too deliberate. That he spoke like someone repeating instructions. I didn't say that he'd asked me to walk into the woods with him, or that the service road he pointed to wasn't marked on any map I'd seen. But the thing I didn't say, the thing I still struggle with, is this. When the patrolman pulled the truck around to head back toward my car, the headlights swept across the tree lane we'd passed earlier. And for just a split second, through the curtain of falling snow, I saw a shape standing between the pines. Still. Waiting. Watching the truck move away. I don't drive Route 19 anymore. I take the long way around the mountains, the route with gas stations and houses and people. I don't care if it adds an hour. I don't care if it adds 3. Because sometimes, even now, when snow starts falling in that heavy, soundless way, I hear a voice in my memory. Calm, steady, too close. They don't like being alone on Christmas. And I know that if I ever stop walking in the wrong place again, I might not be alone either.